Cade Harlow had not waited for anything in 11 years. Not a door. Not a decision. Not a woman. He walked into the Winter Summit Hall at exactly 7 in the evening, still wearing his travel jacket because he had come straight from the tarmac, and within 30 seconds a junior diplomat appeared at his elbow with a glass of water, a press schedule, and an apology for the cold air near the east entrance. He had not asked for any of it. He never had to. The hall was enormous, high ceilings, white stone walls, long tables draped in grey linen. Hundreds of people moving in careful, deliberate patterns around each other the way people do when the conversations they are having matter to the careers they want to keep. Representatives from 6 northern territories, 3 land councils, 2 international conservation bodies, and the personal delegations of 9 alpha houses. The Alpha King himself would not arrive until the following morning. Tonight was the opening gathering, an organized kind of noise that Cade had been attending for over a decade. He knew how it worked. He knew which clusters to approach and which to let breathe. He knew which men here were genuinely powerful and which ones had simply learned to dress like it. He moved through the room the way water moves through a pipe, without resistance, without effort, arriving exactly where it was meant to arrive. People spoke to him. He spoke back. He remembered names, territories, disputes, small courtesies. A woman named Lydia from the Western Land Council laughed at something he said and touched his arm and looked at him the way women at these events usually looked at him, like they were deciding something. He smiled at her. Warm. Present. Empty. That last part was new. Or not new exactly. Just more visible to him lately. He excused himself after 10 minutes and moved toward the far side of the room where the refreshment table was set up near the tall windows. The city spread below in the dark, scattered lights in the cold. He stood there for a moment with his glass and let himself be still in a way he rarely allowed in rooms full of people. A woman walked past him. She was moving with purpose, a folder tucked under one arm and a canvas bag over the other shoulder, and she was looking at a sheet of paper in her hand with the focused expression of someone who had a destination and was mildly annoyed at the number of people between her and it. She wore a dark green coat over a plain black shirt. Her hair was pulled back without ceremony. She was not dressed for the event, or rather she was dressed for a version of the event that existed only in her own head, where what mattered was the work and not the performance around it. She walked past him without looking up. He waited. She did not look back. Cade stood at the window for a moment longer than he intended to. He could not have said why. She was gone, absorbed somewhere into the far end of the hall. He had not spoken to her. She had not spoken to him. Nothing had happened. He picked up his glass. Set it down. Picked it up again. He found Garrett near the center of the room, the Alpha King's senior advisor, a short man with a white face and the kind of easy authority that came from 40 years of knowing where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically and otherwise. Garrett greeted him with a handshake and immediately began talking about the land use negotiations scheduled for the following afternoon. Cade listened. He asked the right questions. He gave the right answers. He noted the names of 3 territorial representatives who would need careful handling in the morning. He did all of this on one part of his attention. The other part of his attention was, quietly and without his permission, tracking the green coat across the room. He did not act on it. He finished the conversation with Garrett and moved to the next one, and the next, and by the time the evening's opening address had been given and the formal portion of the night worn down, he had spoken to 43 people and eaten nothing and drunk half a glass of water and remembered with perfect clarity the exact angle of a stranger's head as she looked at a piece of paper while walking past him. He was outside his room on the 8th floor, key in hand, when he acknowledged it to himself. His wolf was awake. Not restless in the usual way, the low, rolling edge of alertness that came with political environments and rooms full of power. This was different. Quieter. More interested. The feeling of something leaning forward, ears up, nose into the wind. He had not felt his wolf pay that kind of attention to a person in a long time. He could not remember the last time. He stood in the corridor and thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. Then he told himself it meant nothing, opened the door, and went to bed. He did not sleep until very late. His wolf did not sleep at all. The assignment came the next morning over breakfast. Not over eggs or coffee or the kind of civilized morning routine that Kate preferred before dealing with politics. It came at 7:42, mid-bite, delivered by a junior aide who looked apologetic in the way that people look when they are handing someone a small indignity wrapped in official language. Garrett had sent the briefing. One paragraph. The Conservation Coalition attending the summit had flagged a credible security concern, something related to a land opposition group with enough money to be dangerous and enough anonymity to be difficult. The Alpha King wanted the coalition's lead representative given personal security coverage for the duration of the summit. 3 days. Discreet. The lead representative was a woman named Maura Voss, wildlife conservationist. The attached photograph showed a woman in field clothes standing in front of what appeared to be a dry riverbed, pointing at something off camera with the expression of a person who had explained this particular thing 17 times and was prepared to explain it 17 more. The green coat was not in the photograph, but Cade recognized her anyway. He put the briefing down. He drank his coffee. He read the paragraph again. His wolf was doing something that was not quite satisfaction and not quite amusement, but was deeply, thoroughly awake. He wrote back to Garrett in 2 sentences, confirmed, and what time did she begin her morning? Garrett replied in 1, 7:30, she had already started. Cade closed the message, stood up, and went to find a woman who did not know he was coming and would not, he suspected, be particularly glad about it. He found her in a meeting room on the 4th floor with 4 other people, all of them gathered around a table covered in maps and printed documents and 2 laptops that appeared to be running different versions of the same spreadsheet. She was standing at the far end, pointing at something on the largest map, and she was mid-sentence when he knocked and opened the door. She looked up. He introduced himself. Beta of the Alpha King's house. Assigned to her security for the summit's duration. He was brief. Professional. He did not smile in the way that he usually smiled at people he needed something from. He kept his hands still and his voice flat and gave her the information like a man reading a manual. She looked at him for a long moment. Not the way women usually looked at him. Not assessing, not interested, not deciding. Just looking, the way you look at a problem you have been given that you did not ask for and do not currently have time to deal with. She said, "Is this necessary?" He said the credible security concern had been flagged at the Alpha King's level. It was not optional. She said, "I have a full agenda today." He said he was aware and would stay out of her way. She looked at him for another second. Then she turned back to the map and pointed at the thing she had been pointing at before he walked in, and continued the sentence he had interrupted as if he had not spoken at all. Cade moved to the side of the room. He stood near the door. He did not speak. He watched her work. She was not performing competence. That was the thing he noticed first and could not stop noticing. Some people in rooms like this, rooms full of information and stakes, have a quality of wanting to be seen being capable. A slight angle to their posture, a calibrated confidence that is aimed at an audience. She had none of that. She was thinking out loud with people she trusted, which meant she was sharp in a way that was completely unself-conscious and therefore twice as visible. She argued with one of her colleagues about a water rights clause with the comfortable directness of someone who had been arguing about it for months and had no patience for courtesy about it. She was right. Kate could tell she was right even without context for the specific clause because her logic was clean and she killed her colleague's counterpoint in 7 words without raising her voice. She did not look at Cade once during the 3-hour meeting. Not because she was ignoring him. He could tell the difference. She simply had no reason to look at him and so she did not. He was furniture. He was a standing lamp in the corner that happened to have a pulse. He had been many things to many people. He had never been furniture. At noon she stood up and began rolling up the largest map with practiced efficiency and said to her team that they would resume at 2 and that someone needed to bring food because she had not eaten since yesterday's dinner and her brain was beginning to feel like wet paper. Her colleague, a younger man with red hair named Owen, said he would find sandwiches. She said thank you in the tone of a person who meant it simply and completely. She picked up her canvas bag and her folder and walked toward the door. She stopped when she reached him, because he was near the door and she needed to pass. She said, "Are you eating?" He said he had eaten at breakfast. She said, "That was 5 hours ago. You are going to be standing next to me all day. I would prefer you to be sharp and not hungry." He said he was fine. She looked at him the way she had looked at the water rights clause. Briefly, entirely, then on to the next thing. She said, "Suit yourself," and walked into the corridor. He followed her. 1 step behind, 2 to the right. Standard coverage position. His wolf was paying the kind of quiet, total attention that it had not paid to anything in a very long time. Cade kept his face neutral and his breathing even and told himself that it was just the work. It was always just the work. He was not certain he believed himself. The afternoon sessions were longer than the morning. 3 separate working groups, 2 corridors, 1 brief and tense exchange with a territorial representative named Douglas who seemed to feel that the Conservation Coalition's position was a personal insult. Mara handled Douglas the way you handle a small fire on a campsite, not with panic, not with performance, just with calm and targeted water. She did not apologize for her position. She did not soften its edges. She explained it twice with identical patience and then told Douglas, pleasantly and with no aggression whatsoever, that she was willing to continue this conversation when he had reviewed the data she had just sent to his briefing folder. Douglas looked at Cade. Men sometimes did that when they ran out of things to say to women who outmatched them, looked at the nearest man as if checking for permission to feel frustrated. Cade looked back at him with an expression that said nothing at all. Douglas left. Mara made a note on her folder. Did not acknowledge what had just happened. Moved to the next corridor. At 6 in the evening, she came out of the last session and stopped in the hallway and stood very still for a moment. Not collapsed. Not theatrical. Just stopping. The way people stop when they have been running all day and the running is finally done. Cade stopped behind her. After a moment she said, without turning around, "Good night, Mr. Harlow." He said good night. She walked to the elevator. Pressed the button. The doors opened. She stepped in. She looked at the floor numbers above the door as the doors closed and did not look at him once. He stood in the corridor for a moment. His wolf pressed close to the inside of him, like a dog leaning on a door. He exhaled slowly. 1 day down. 2 to go. He walked back toward his own floor and tried to remember the last time a single day had felt this long and this short at the same time. He could not. By the second morning, Cade had abandoned any attempt to pretend he was not paying attention to her. Not because he had decided to. Because it was no longer possible to pretend otherwise, not to himself, not in the private space behind his own eyes where he could at least be honest. She arrived at the 4th floor meeting room at 7:28. 2 minutes early. She had coffee in one hand, not from the hotel service, from a small paper cup that suggested she had found an independent shop nearby, which meant she had left the hotel before 7, which meant she slept less than he did and was already functional. Her team arrived in stages over the next 10 minutes. She used those 10 minutes to review notes. Not her phone. Paper notes, in handwriting that looked like someone had taught her shorthand and she had immediately adapted it into her own private language. Cade stood near the door and watched her think. He had seen a lot of powerful people think. He had stood in rooms with the Alpha King during decisions that affected thousands of lives. He knew what power looked like when it worked quietly, when it worked loudly, when it worked in performance and when it worked in private. More of us thought the way a river moved. Without announcement. Without looking for applause. Just constant, deliberate, and going somewhere specific. Owen appeared with a bag of pastries and set them on the table with the air of someone who had found salvation. Mara took one without looking up from her notes and ate half of it in 3 bites. Owen poured her more coffee from a thermos he had apparently brought specifically for this purpose. She said thank you without looking up. It was a small thing. The kind of thing that only registers if you are paying total attention. The Alpha King, a man Cade loved with the particular loyalty of someone who had chosen his allegiance freely, was surrounded by people who anticipated his needs before he felt them. Cade had spent 11 years making sure of it. He would not have said this was servitude. It was care. But there was a difference, he was noticing now, between receiving care as a natural fact of your existence and receiving it as a surprise, a small unexpected kindness that registered on your face as genuine gratitude even when you were not looking up. He thought about this for too long. The morning session ran over. The afternoon session ran directly into an unscheduled meeting with a territorial adjudicator who had questions that Mora answered with such thorough preparation that the adjudicator ended up taking more notes than he had brought. Cade did not speak. He was not asked to. He monitored the room, the corridor, the people who moved past the doorway. He did his job with the quiet efficiency that had made him the best better in recent memory and also, currently, the most thoroughly relevant person in every room he entered. At 4 in the afternoon, she paused in the corridor outside a set of double doors and turned around to look at him directly. He stopped. She said, "You have been standing behind me for 2 days." He said that was correct. She said, "You are good at it. Most people in your position make themselves felt. You do not." He did not know what to do with the observation, so he said nothing. She looked at him with the steady consideration she applied to everything. Then she said, "Why did you take this assignment?" He said the Alpha King had requested it. She said, "That is not what I asked. I asked why you took it. Someone like you, someone with your rank, could have sent a junior member of your team." He said he preferred to handle credible threats directly. She held his gaze for a moment. She did not look convinced. She also did not look deceived. She looked like a woman filing a piece of information in a folder that she would return to at a time of her own choosing. She nodded once and pushed open the double doors. He followed. The evening session was a closed working group, small room, 8 people. The air in the room was tighter than the previous sessions. Something had shifted in the negotiations over the previous 24 hours. The territorial house had changed its position on a water access clause, which meant the entire framework Mora's coalition had been building for 18 months had a new crack running through it that she was going to have to work around. She handled it without breaking stride. She asked 3 questions and listened to the answers with the focused stillness of someone who was doing calculations behind her eyes. Then she proposed a modified approach that addressed the changed position without conceding the core of what her coalition needed. It was elegant. It was fast. The room was quiet for a moment after she finished. The adjudicator from that afternoon was there. He looked at her the way people look at something that has just surprised them genuinely. Cade looked at the door. His wolf looked at her. When the session ended, it was past 8. The building had the particular quiet of an official space after the official business was done, corridors half-lit, the occasional distant sound of a door or a phone. Mora's team dispersed with the exhausted efficiency of people who had been working since dawn. She walked out into the main corridor and stopped near a window, the city below scattered in the dark the way it had been on the first night. She was not looking at it. She was looking at nothing, the way people look when they are very tired, and the looking is not the point. Cade stopped a few feet behind her. After a while she said, "My coalition has been working on this framework for a year and a half." He did not say anything because she was not looking for a response. She was speaking to the corridor and he happened to be in it. She said, 18 months. 3 territories. 7 separate land surveys. 2 legal challenges that we won. And now a single house changes one position and we are rebuilding the foundation in the middle of the structure. She was quiet. Then she laughed. A short, sudden thing. Not bitter. Not performed. Just genuinely amused at the scale of the inconvenience. It was 3 seconds. Maybe 4. It changed the entire shape of her face. Cade did not move. She turned around. And in the brief, careless moment before she registered that she had turned toward him, he was looking at her with something that was not careful and not controlled and not the neutral professional expression he had been maintaining for 2 days. She saw it. Not what it meant, he was not sure yet what it meant, but she saw the lack of his usual guard, the half-second where he was just a man looking at her without any architecture around it. Her expression changed. Not away from him. Not toward him either. Something more complicated than both. The look of a woman who had seen something she did not expect and was deciding whether to address it. She decided not to. She said, "Good night, Mr. Harlow." Her voice was even. Careful. He said good night. She walked to the elevator. He watched her go. The doors closed. He stood in the corridor for a long time. His wolf was very still. Not asleep. Just waiting. The particular patience of something that knows it has already found what it was looking for and is simply watching the rest of it catch up. The summit ended on a Wednesday morning. Not with ceremony, the final sessions were long and technical and produced a set of documents that would spend the next several months being reviewed by people who had not been in the room. Morrow's coalition reached a workable resolution on the water access clause. Not perfect. Workable. She accepted it the way she accepted most things, clearly, without drama, and already thinking about the next step. Her team had flights to catch. Owen had a flight at 2. The others had various departures spread across the afternoon. There was a brief, genuine moment of the kind that happens at the end of shared hard work, people who have been in the trenches together for 3 days acknowledging it without making too much of it. Mara thanked each of them by name and with specifics. "Not great work, team," she said to Owen. "The water survey data you pulled on Tuesday changed the shape of the whole argument, and you know it." He looked like she had given him something he would keep. Cade's assignment ended at noon. He was on his way to the elevator with his bag when he found himself taking the long route past the lobby. She was there. Standing near the main doors, her canvas bag over one shoulder, waiting for a car. She had her phone out but was not looking at it. She was looking at the street through the glass doors in the way of someone who has nowhere they urgently need to be for the first time in several days. He stopped. He was aware of what he was doing. He was doing it anyway. He crossed the lobby and said her name. She turned. Took in the bag on his shoulder. Said, "Your assignment ended." He said it had. She said, "Then why are you still here?" The honest answer was that he did not know. Or he did know and he was not ready to say it. Both of these things were equally true. He said he wanted to ask her something. She waited. She had the quality of a person who is never visibly impatient. She simply became very still, as though she were giving time permission to pass. He said, "The land rights work your coalition is doing. The Northern Territory water access, that overlaps with lands that fall under the Alpha King's direct oversight." She said she was aware of that. He said there might be value in a direct conversation between her coalition and the King's office. That he could facilitate that. If she was interested. She looked at him. Not quickly. For a long moment, straight and clear, in the way she looked at everything she was deciding about. She said, "Is that why you are still in this lobby, Mr. Harlow? A professional facilitation offer?" He said yes. She said, "You are a very good liar." He said nothing. She said, "I have watched powerful men decide they want something they cannot simply have for almost 15 years. I know what that looks like. I know the way they turn it into something that sounds like business so they do not have to say what it actually is." He said, "I am not lying about the facilitation. That offer is genuine." She said, "I believe you. That is what makes you more interesting than most. The offer is real and the reason you are here is also real and they both exist at the same time." A car pulled up outside. Her car. She looked at it. Then at him. She said, "Send the formal facilitation request through official channels. I will respond to it." She picked up her bag. "And Mr. Harlow, whatever the other reason is, think carefully about whether it is what you believe it to be. Men in your position often confuse novelty for interest." She walked to the doors. They slid open. She crossed to the car, got in, and was gone before he had found any words. He stood in the lobby for a long time. Not embarrassed. Not dismissed. Deeply, quietly undone. She was right. He knew she was right. He had spent 12 years watching men with power pursue women who did not immediately yield, as though the resistance itself was the point, and the moment the woman stopped resisting, the man's interest went with it. He needed to know, and he did not know how to know without doing the thing that would prove her right if she was right. He went back to his room and sat on the edge of the bed and thought about it with an honesty that was uncomfortable, in the way that things are uncomfortable when they are making you better. His wolf waited. Patient. Certain. Cade was not certain. Not yet. But he was thinking about it in a way that did not feel like the way he had thought about women before. It did not feel like wanting. It felt like something that had more gravity to it, something that did not lift when he looked away. He did not sleep well that night either. He sent the formal facilitation request the following morning, through official channels, exactly as she had asked. He did not add anything personal. But he wrote it with care. The kind of care that is not for the documentation. 3 weeks passed. The facilitation request was accepted. That took 4 business days. Official response time, appropriately formal, routed through the coalition's administrative contact. Cade had expected that. He had also, privately, expected nothing, and the response had arrived anyway. The overlap between the Alpha King's Northern Land holdings and the coalition's water access work was real. This was not an excuse, it was a genuine convergence that required coordination. Cade managed that coordination with the precise professionalism that had defined his 11 years as beta, and the first formal working session between the King's office and the coalition happened over a video call that Maura attended with Owen and one other member of her team. She spoke to Cade the way she spoke to the rest of the people on the call. Clearly. Professionally. With no particular acknowledgement of the lobby conversation or anything that had come before it. He matched her entirely. After the call, he sat at his desk and looked at the notes he had taken and felt the particular quiet of a man who has decided something without fully having decided it yet. He had not manufactured a reason to be near her since the lobby. He had not looked for openings or constructed opportunities. He had sent the facilitation request because it was legitimate and because she had asked him to, and when it produced a real working connection, he had managed it as the professional it required him to be. He was doing this because she had been right, and he knew she had been right, and he needed to find out whether what he felt was the novelty of resistance or something that lived underneath that and did not require the resistance to survive it. It was surviving. 3 weeks of distance and it was not smaller. It was clearer. More settled. Like something that had been restless finding a position it could hold. 2 more working sessions happened over the following weeks. Then a scheduling conflict meant that a document review needed to happen in person, and the Alpha King's office was the location that worked for all parties. Maura came with Owen. They were in the building for 4 hours. Cade managed the meeting. He was present but not central. He facilitated, he ensured the right people were in the room at the right time, he handled the administrative friction that comes with cross-organization collaboration. At the end, as Maura and Owen were gathering their things, she said to Cade, quietly, while Owen was talking to the King's Records coordinator, "This is working." The former channel. He said he was glad. She said, "I did not expect you to actually do it." He said, "I told you the offer was genuine." She looked at him. A flicker of something that was not yet warmth but was neighboring it. She said, "You did." Owen appeared at her side with his bag and she turned and they walked toward the exit. At the door she looked back once. Brief. Not an invitation. Just a look. Cade held it for the half-second it lasted. He thought, I can work with that. His wolf, for the first time in weeks, made a sound that was not restlessness. Something lower. Quieter. Satisfied. The problem with the opposition group arrived the following Monday. Not as a surprise, Garrett had been tracking the situation since before the summit. The group was organized around resistance to the water rights framework the coalition was building, and their methods had graduated in the past month from obstructive filings to something that had the shape of deliberate interference. Documents misrouted. A coalition consultant's travel arrangement cancelled without explanation. One territorial representative who had been prepared to sign the framework suddenly reversing without giving a reason. Garrett put the full briefing on Cade's desk on a Monday morning with a note that said, "Assess and advise." Cade read it twice. He went to the Alpha King's office. The king was at his desk, reading a morning dispatch. He was a large, quiet man with the patience of someone who had been the most powerful person in every room he entered for so long that he had stopped needing to demonstrate it. He looked up when Cade entered and set the dispatch down. Cade said, "The opposition group targeting the Water Rights Coalition has escalated. The pattern now matches coordinated interference, not independent resistance." The king said, "I saw Garrett's note." Cade said, "They have the money to do significant damage to the framework. If they reach the coalition's field researchers, the work loses 3 years, not 3 months." The king looked at him for a moment. Not the way he looked at things he was deciding. The way he looked at things he had already decided and was waiting for Cade to finish arriving at. He said, "What do you want to do?" Cade said, "Protect the coalition's work. Directly. Embed with their field team during the Northern Territory survey next week. Remove any opportunity the opposition has to interfere at the operational level." The king said, "That is a significant use of your time." Cade said, "It is the right use of it." The king looked at him again. The same look. He said, "All right." He picked up the dispatch. Cade turned to leave. The king said, without looking up, "Cade." Cade stopped. The king said, "Be careful." Cade thought he meant in the field. He said he would be. He thought later that the king had probably not meant that at all. The Northern Territory field survey ran for 5 days. The survey team was 8 people, Morrow's core coalition researchers, 2 land assessors, and Owen, who had apparently become a permanent fixture of every Operation Morrow ran. Cade arrived on the first morning with 2 members of the king's security detail and a thorough briefing on the opposition group's non-associates in the region. Morrow met him at the field camp with a cup of coffee she had not intended to give him and then apparently decided to anyway. She handed it to him. She said, "The former channel again." He said yes. She said, "You could have sent your people and stayed in the city." He said the threat assessment warranted direct presence. She looked at him the same way she had looked at him in the summit lobby. The look that said she had fired something and would return to it. She said, "Drink your coffee. We start in 20 minutes." The work was not glamorous. Field surveys rarely are. It involved moving through difficult terrain in cold weather with equipment that was more important than comfort and timelines that did not negotiate with weather or fatigue. Cade had spent years in environments far more difficult and knew how to work in conditions that required patience rather than force. He moved at the survey team's pace. He handled logistics without being asked. He carried equipment when the terrain was rough. He was not performing usefulness. He was just useful. On the 3rd day, in a narrow pass between 2 ridges, Owen tripped on loose rock and went down hard. Not serious, a bruised knee, wounded pride. Cade had him upright in under 2 seconds and handed him back his survey equipment and said nothing because Owen did not need commentary, he needed to continue. Owen said, "Thanks," in the way of a young man who is relieved not to be forced over and kept moving. That evening, at the camp, Morrow sat beside Cade near the fire while the rest of the team ate inside. She did not say anything for a while. Neither did he. She said, "You are different out here." He asked, "In what way?" She said, "In the summit you were managing everything. Every movement deliberate, every word placed. Out here you are just present." He said the summit required one kind of attention. This required another. She said, "Which do you prefer?" He thought about it. Honestly. He said, "This." She was quiet, looking at the fire. She said, "I said something to you in the lobby. About novelty." He said he remembered. She said, "I believed it when I said it. I still think it is true for most men in your position." He waited. She said, "I am not certain it is entirely true for you." She stood up, brushed off her jacket, said good night without ceremony and went inside. He stayed by the fire for a long time. His wolf leaned close, the way it had been leaning for weeks. Not restless anymore. Just present. Warm. Like something that had finally found the direction it had been trying to face. The opposition made their move on the fourth day. It was not theatrical. These things rarely are. A convoy of vehicles on the access road, 3 of them, moving fast, no collision markings. The lead vehicle made no effort at subtlety. They wanted the survey halted and they wanted it visible enough to be a warning. Cade was already moving before the first vehicle stopped. He had the survey team in a covered position in under 90 seconds. His 2 security people took the south position. He took the road. What happened on the road was brief and not particularly complicated. 5 men from the lead vehicle. One was clearly the organizer, suit, phone, the expression of someone who had bought his authority and expected it to work in the field the way it worked in a boardroom. The other 4 were employed to enforce it. Cade did not explain anything. He identified himself as a representative of the Alpha King's house and informed them that the survey team was under the King's direct protection and that the road they were currently blocking was on land under the King's jurisdiction and that they had approximately 90 seconds to reverse their vehicles before the situation became something that could not be resolved without formal documentation that would follow all of them for a very long time. The organizer started to speak. Cade looked at him once. Flatly. With the full weight of 11 years of knowing exactly how dangerous he could be and never needing to demonstrate it loudly. The organizer stopped speaking. 2 minutes later, the vehicles reversed. Cade walked back to the survey team. He had taken a hit to his left side from the second man, an attempt at force that Cade had redirected, but not without the redirected energy finding his ribs. He was aware of it in the way that you are aware of things that are going to matter more tomorrow than they matter right now. He told the team it was handled. Owen said, "Are you hurt?" He said he was fine. Mara was looking at him. The way she looked at things she was deciding about. But there was something in it now that was not the assessment quality she usually had. Something more immediate. A tightness around the edges of her expression that he recognized, after a moment, as something she was controlling. She said, "Come here." He went. She looked at his side, not touching, just reading the way he was standing. She said, "You are favoring the left." He said it was a bruised rib. Not broken. He had broken ribs before and knew the difference. She said, "Sit down." He said he was fine. She said, "I did not ask if you were fine. I said sit down." He sat down. Owen appeared from somewhere with the first aid kit, because Owen had apparently decided that appearing with useful things was his primary role in life. Mara took it and assessed the damage with hands that were efficient and careful and did not ask his permission before they moved. He said nothing. She said nothing. The rest of the team was dispersed around the camp. The fire had been rebuilt. The survey data was safe. The threat was gone. Her hands were careful and the fire was warm and the camp was quiet. After a moment she said, without looking up, "You did not have to put yourself between them and us." He said it was the job. She said, "You are the beta of an Alpha King. You did not have to come to a field survey in the north. You did not have to take the road." He said nothing. She looked up. At close range, with the firelight, with her hands still where they were. She said, "Why?" He said, quietly, "Because the alternative was not something I was willing to consider." She held his gaze. A long, still moment. She did not say anything. She finished what she was doing and sat back and looked at the fire. He looked at the same fire. Neither of them moved away. She did not let him in all at once. He had not expected her to. He had learned, over weeks of watching her work, that Morovos did nothing carelessly. Not a word, not a decision, not a step. Everything she did was considered. Not slow, she could move fast when the work required it. But considered. Grounded. She did not give anything she had not first decided to give. So when things shifted between them, they shifted the way they shifted in everything she did. With intention. With clarity. Without theater. It started after the field survey. She sent him a message 2 days after they returned to the city. Not personal. A follow-up on the Northern Territory coordination, a question about a land survey reference that needed clarification from the king's records. He answered it the same day. Thoroughly, because the question deserved a thorough answer, not because he was trying to impress her. She replied with, helpful, as always. Thank you. Owen, he later learned, had said something to her the morning after the road incident. He did not know exactly what Owen had said. But Maura mentioned it once, indirectly, and from the way she mentioned it he gathered that Owen had said something true in the simple, unguarded way that young people say true things when they have not yet learned to be careful. She called him 2 weeks after the survey. Not through official channels. His direct number. He picked up before the second ring. She said, "Are your ribs healed?" He said they were. Mostly. She said, "Good." A pause. "I want to say something and I want to say it clearly so there is no misunderstanding." He said he was listening. She said, "I do not do things halfway. I am not built for it. If I let someone in, I let them in entirely, and that means I have also been hurt entirely, more than once. I am not fragile about it. I do not need you to be careful of me the way some men are careful of something they think might break. But I am deliberate. I make choices with my eyes open and I keep them open." He said, "I know." She said, "Do you?" He said, "I have been watching you work for weeks." Deliberate is not a strong enough word for what you are. A brief silence. Then she said, "What would you use?" He thought about it. He said, "Uncompromising. Not as a flaw. As a thing you built out of everything that tried to make you into something smaller." The silence that followed was different from the one before it. She said, quietly, "That is the most accurate thing anyone has ever said to me on a first attempt." He said, "I have had a lot of time to pay attention." She said, "I noticed." Another pause. Not uncomfortable. Something warmer than that. She said, "I told you in the summit lobby that men like you want the novelty of a woman who does not want them. That the moment she did, you would be gone." He said, "I remember." She said, "I need you to tell me honestly whether I was right. Not to reassure me. Honestly." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When I first saw you at the summit, I did not know what I was feeling. It could have been novelty. I cannot tell you it was not, at the very beginning. But I went 3 weeks without seeing you and it was not smaller. It was clearer. And I have spent enough time near you now to know that what I feel is not about resistance. It is about you specifically. The way you think. The way you are honest even when honesty is inconvenient. The way you accept being wrong about something and use it and move forward without any of the shame that most people carry. I do not need you to be unavailable. I would like you to be available. That is entirely different." She did not respond immediately. Then she said, "Come for dinner on Thursday." Not a facilitation meeting. Dinner. He said, "Yes." She said, "I cook badly. I want to be honest about that upfront." He said he could cook. She said, "Then you can cook." He said, "All right." She said good night and ended the call. He sat with his phone in his hand and felt his wolf settle into something that was not the alertness of pursuit or the restlessness of wanting. It was deeper and simpler than either of those. The feeling of something that had been ranging for a long time finally knowing which direction to go. Thursday was not dramatic. That was the thing he thought about afterward, the absence of drama, and how the absence was not a disappointment but a relief. Her apartment was exactly what he would have expected if he had let himself imagine it, which he had not allowed himself to do. Books on every surface. A small table near the window with paper spread across it that she had moved to make room, not fully, so one corner of the table still had a document about watershed zones. Plants in various stages of thriving. A coffee maker that looked older than some countries. He cooked. She sat at the kitchen counter and read through documents while he worked and occasionally asked him questions about what he was doing, not from politeness but because she was genuinely interested in processes and how things came together. He told her about the dish, a simple thing, nothing complicated, something his mother had made. He said that without thinking about it. It surprised him. She looked up from a document. She said, "You don't talk about personal things easily." He said, "No." She said, "What was she like?" He said, "Direct." She had no patience for anything she considered a waste of time. She taught me that doing something well quietly was worth more than doing it partially loudly. Mora smiled. A real one. The kind that moved the whole shape of her face. She said, "I would have liked her." He looked at her. He said, "She would have liked you." They ate at a small table near the window with the watershed zone document still in one corner. She asked him about the Alpha King, not for information, but from the kind of curiosity that wanted to know what he was like as a person. Kate told her things he did not usually tell people. Not secrets. Just truths that he kept for himself because most people were not interested in the truth of the man, only in the power of the position. She listened the way she did everything. With her full attention on him. It had been a long time since anyone had given him their full attention and meant it as a gift rather than a strategy. After dinner she made tea badly, the water was not hot enough and the tea steeped for twice as long as it should have and came out the color of disappointment. She handed it to him with a completely straight face and said, "I told you I was bad at this." He drank it. All of it. He said it was fine. She laughed. Openly. Warm. He thought, there it is. The thing I have been watching for weeks. The thing she does not give easily and gives entirely when she gives it at all. Later, standing at her door with his jacket on and the city outside doing what cities do at 10 at night, she looked at him and said, "I am not going to make this easy for you. I want to be clear about that. I do not bend to accommodate and I do not shrink and I do not make myself smaller because it is more convenient. If that becomes a problem for you, it becomes a problem." He said, "I know." She said, "You say that now?" He said, "I know that now. I have watched you not bend and not shrink for weeks while everyone around you tried various combinations of pressure and flattery and institutional weight. I do not want you to be smaller. I would not know what to do with a smaller version of you." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I need that to remain true." He said, "It will." She said, "I can work with that." It was not a declaration. It was not a moment designed for anyone's memory. It was two people, at a door, after bad tea and a real meal, choosing something with their eyes open. His wolf was quiet. Not the silence of something waiting. Not the silence of something searching. The silence of something that had arrived. He said good night and walked to his car. He did not look back at her building because she was not a thing to be looked back at longingly. She was a direction he had decided to walk in, and he had already made the decision, and there was no drama left to perform. The drive back was quiet. The city moved past the windows. He thought about the small table with the watershed zone document in one corner and the badly steeped tea and the sound of her laughing and the way she had said "I can work with that" as though she were accepting a proposal at a work meeting, practical and clear and meaning every word. He thought about the summit lobby. The woman who walked past him without looking back. She was right that she would not make it easy. He knew that. He also knew that easy had never been worth anything to him. The things he valued most, his loyalty to the king, his work, his sense of himself, none of them had been easy. All of them were exact. All of them were chosen. The next morning he arrived at work early. He had a briefing to write and a land coordination meeting to prepare for and a follow-up on the opposition group's activities that needed attention. He did all of it with the same careful precision he brought to everything. And he texted her at 8:15, "The tea was fine." Her response came at 8:17, "It was not and you know it." He put his phone face down on his desk and looked at the briefing notes. He was smiling in a way that had nothing careful about it. His wolf was quiet. The room was ordinary. Everything was exactly right.